as you can see, we ran our program in debug mode, and we have now a highlighted green line, which indicates that the Java code is actually paused and waiting to execute this line of code. So, okay, that's cool. How do we actually tell it to execute that line of code? Well, up here is our, I guess, controls that allow us to control the flow of our debug. So, here we just have the resume button, so if I click this, it will essentially run the code until either it hits another breakpoint or until the execution completes. Terminate, that's pretty self-explanatory. It'll just stop the debug mode, and it'll actually terminate the program right where you are. So it won't actually execute any more code. It'll just stop, exit, nothing more will happen. Now here we have step into. Now this one I don't use too frequently because sometimes you'll get into the nitty-gritty code of Java. You'll get into the actual Java class files. I could probably show you what that's like, but I don't want to do it just yet. I use it sparingly. Typically I use step over, which means execute this line of code and just move on to the next line. So if I do that now, if I click step over, what it's going to do is execute this entire line of code, which will in turn instantiate this class. Now, upon instantiation of this class, the code will have to go into the constructor of the file IO class and execute the code inside of the constructor. Well, that's exactly what we looked at over here in the file IO. This public file IO is the constructor, and this code here is everything that's inside of that constructor. Since we've put a breakpoint right here at line 16, the code should stop at line 16. So let's see if that's what actually happens. Let's go back to our line here. I'm going to click on step over, and there you go. So now the code has executed the instantiation of our file IO constructor. It's declared our buffer reader, and it's executed the first part of the try block, and now we're sitting and waiting to instantiate a buffered reader and then instantiate a file reader with the file name that we're passing in. So in debug mode, a real bonus here is that we can hover over our variables and it'll actually show us what the value of that variable is. Let me just bring that up. There you go. So we set the value of the variable based on the parameter that we passed in to this constructor, which we saw back in the my program. So I actually hard-coded it as cdrive/afile.txt. So I'm going to go ahead and step over this line, and something interesting will happen. And let's see what happens. So let's step over, and you would have expected it to go to this next line, but instead it jumped into our catch block. Now, why did it do that? Well, that's because right now in my current configuration, I don't have afile.txt stored in the C drive at all. This file doesn't exist. So what happens? Well, it's going to throw an exception. So Java will throw an exception, and since we have this line wrapped inside of our try block, it will then go into the catch block, and it will catch the file not found exception. So we have a file not found exception that we've actually assigned to a variable name of E. And again, like I said, in debug mode, you can hover over your variables, and it'll show you everything there is to know about that particular variable. So we see that it's a file not found exception. We see a detail message saying cdrive/afile, the system cannot find the file specified, and we have a cause and all that stuff. So that's just, it's helpful to know exactly where the problem came from. And this line here, e.print stack trace, will just output the all the pertinent information about the error into our console. So if I step over this guy, like so, you'll see at the bottom here, now we have all of this information regarding our exception. So really handy stuff, the debugger. So